Welcome back to another episode of Financial Wellbeing with Emirates NBD. I'm your host, Dana Kamber. And in today's episode, we're going to be tackling a topic that holds a lot of weight for many people, and that's the concept of debt. So whether you're trying to navigate it, manage it, or avoid it, we're here to help you understand it better. I'm joined by Hamad AlMajidi, Head of Distribution and Asset Management. Hamad, welcome to the podcast. I'm going to go right into it. Is debt avoidable?
Thing is, that has always been sort of demonized. I think you should avoid it, always go with cash. But the thing is, you won't be able to get access to a lot of the things that you have today without debt. And it's not just that, but even I would argue that debt allows you to access financial freedom way more than you would have on your own. Like, for instance, someone would have to rent their whole lives for many, many years, maybe perhaps 20 years or 15 years at least or something, until they accumulate enough money to be able to, not even 15 years actually, now I think of it's going to be far more, to be able to accumulate funds to afford a house, and let alone the fact that houses will continue to grow in value until that time. But if you do actually decide to go with the debt option, then in that case, you're cutting that time into probably 5-6 years. I mean, if you're a heavy saver with a decent income, you can actually afford to buy a house by just affording that down payment of 20%, and the rest you can take on with a bank loan or whatever. So essentially, and rather than paying rent over all these years, it does allow you to keep accumulating that sort of equity and owning more and more percentage of the house as you grow older. So it does allow you that. Whereas if you were forcing yourself to go with cash, you'd have to wait such a long period of time before you're able to get access to any of it.
So is that what you would classify as healthy debt?
It would be healthy debt, but again, healthy debt is subjective, because some people, for example, would take marriage, for example, debt to get married as healthy debt. Some others wouldn't, because essentially it's something that, okay, fine, you're getting a lot from the sentimental perspective and starting a family and all that, absolutely. But from the pure financial perspective, you're not gaining much. Just to be very clear on that end. And even on a car loan, for instance, car loan can work with you or against you. You can be able to access a decent car that is not way beyond your means, and being able to purchase that with debt and minimal equity from your end. However, you can also use it to buy a Porsche that is probably worth 2 years of your salary, which would make zero sense. But again, so it can work with or against you, depending on how you use it, essentially.
So what would be your advice on how to determine if debt is a healthy choice or a viable option in situations?
The way I think of it is that how is it adding value to you at the end of the day? Is it allowing you to get off renting a house and buying a house? Does it allow you to, for example, open up a business, for instance, better than spending it on things that you would just consume, like going on a trip or buying a fancy car or jewelry or whatever? So you are the leader of your finances on that end, and you should be able to best determine what would be the best for you. As I think there's a great book of Morgan Housel. It's called Psychology of Money. It says 2 things you need to know at all times, whether you like them and you care about them or not. One is that you should know what best helps your health and what affects your health, and how to manage your finances. Because if you don't learn how to do it, the world will teach you in ways that you haven't anticipated.
Yeah, it's a good point. It's a very good book, actually. I think it's a good recommendation. I've often heard the term leverage debt. Is that similar to what you explained as well?
Leverage essentially is a form of debt, because you can always obtain leverage, for example, to go on investments or whatever, or you can get a loan against your assets to be able to jump into more investments and things. And those are not wrong per se. I'm with them, but it should be for the financially sophisticated folk, and not for the regular person who wouldn't know how to deal with that sort of thing. Because things with that can go very badly very quickly if you don't know how to manage it. So that's why I always encourage people to go with debt only with the things that it's very hard to go wrong. Buying a house for you to live in, buying a house for an investment. That, I mean, usually in most cases that should be fine. Saying that debt is good or bad is not a very accurate measure of how we should look at it.
Yeah, it's not really black and white.
Exactly.
Looking at behaviors and certain triggers that people fall into when it comes to debt accumulation, like overspending and things of that sort. What are areas where people tend to fall into that accumulation of debt without realizing?
I mean, the closest example I can think of is credit cards. Credit cards can be a double-edged sword, they would say. It can either work with you or work against you. And my rule for credit cards is quite simple. If you cannot pay it by the end of the month, if you cannot pay your full balance by the end of the month, you shouldn't be getting a credit card, because things can go south very, very quickly if you're not able to manage those expenses. Because again, this is something that I think perhaps started to happen in the last few years when people, that was accelerated in the past few years when people started using Apple Pay for everything, is that you stop keeping track of how much you're paying and what you're spending on. So unless you're a very good, you're a decent money manager where you can actually manage how much you're spending and what your income is, things can go very badly.
So if someone were to not pay the full amount, that's essentially debt that they're incurred.
That debt, that not just that it's debt that keeps accumulating, because there will be interest charged on that debt as well. So that is where, and thing is, depending on your income, if you couldn't pay it on let's say in January, you will be spending more in February, and the salary of February will have to cover the balance of January and February. But if you can't pay off the balance of Jan and Feb, that will move to March, which will move to April, and your expenses will keep on adding up, and you'll keep racking up that interest. But your income is not increasing because you weren't able to block it off to begin with. So then you have to go into a massive austerity approach where you just have to stop spending immediately and try to just pay off that debt. The thing is, if you look at, for example, US numbers where you get very accurate numbers on debt balances, most people do not pay their balances on time. But that is because, for different reasons, because their expenses are rising, their incomes are not matching. That's a separate issue. But with us, I think just behaviorally, that would be the easiest area where you can just fall into an endless loop of accumulating debt and interest.
Yeah, you mentioned Apple Pay as a form that kind of like gets people to forget how much they're spending or not realize how much they're spending. And I want to talk a little bit about the trends that we're facing now, like things on social media. You have things like 2-hour delivery, easy returns, payment plans that are literally everywhere. What's the correlation between those factors and debt accumulation?
So I think these tools were designed in such a way that to get you to consume more at the end of the day. However, the thing is that side effect comes in where it doesn't help you keeping track of how much you can pay, of how much essentially you're racking up in terms of expenses. For example, I remember an ad that came up where you can actually get a sandwich or a burrito or something. You can pay it off over 4 or 5 months, which is crazy because it's like 25, 30 dirhams. So it's not much. But again, it shows you which level we're at the moment, where you actually a lot of your daily expenses, the stuff that you don't even think about, end up accumulating over a number of months. So imagine that and thinking, you know what? Why don't I buy a new TV? But why don't I buy a new iPhone? Why don't I do this? Why don't I do that? And you can always get these to pay them off over 24 months and stuff. And if you think of it from a high level, you'd see that these are great tools because eventually I can get access to, I can pay them off from income that I haven't earned yet, which is great. However, the risky part is that, as I mentioned earlier, things can go south very quickly once you don't realize how much you're paying off. I remember, especially when we were kids, you're always keeping track of how much you're spending because you have that in cash. But now, I remember I had a conversation with my niece saying, why don't you get a new car? You can just Apple Pay it. That's it. Khalas, there's nothing else you need to do. Thinking that money just comes in from thin air. And the thing is, I think this sort of effect happens to some people where they think, khalas, I'll just put it on Tabi or Tamar or any of those buy now, pay later. And at the end of the day, I don't have to pay it now. So khalas, I'll be fine. Especially with, and some of them offer even longer periods of time, like 12 or 24 months as well.
What can people do to be more aware about their behaviors or triggers when it comes to spending for them to be able to not fall into certain pitfalls around debt accumulation?
One of the great things that are arising nowadays is that you're seeing a lot of fintechs that are focusing on spending and behavioral spending as well. There are a lot of applications that do that. I personally prefer an Excel sheet.
Yeah.
I'm very old school in that.
You're a banker.
so you can place everything in Excel sheet. I have my investments, my major expenses, what payments have I made, what payments should I be expecting, because in this day and age, especially as you grow older and as the counterparties and the things that you buy and deal with increase, things become very complicated to keep track of. So you have to do it one way or another. And if you don't, things just get lost along the way. I mean, I remember a friend of mine had, I think, got a bill that he was told he needed to pay off from a year ago, and he was about to pay it off, only to go back to his main tracker to track his funds, and realize that they were supposed to pay him, not the other way around. So when he spoke to them, then they're the ones who actually paid him after reaching out to him, and he completely forgot about it. So it's just a very tiny example of where things can get completely mixed up in this day and age.
It's a really good point of having something organized for you to monitor your spending. Is there like major things that people should be considering when creating that tracker for themselves to be able to understand where their money is going?
I mean, it depends on your habits essentially. I mean, everyone has groceries and utilities and stuff, but then you get that, for example, that travel component. How much do you spend on leisure and traveling and entertainment? How much do you spend on things that are unnecessary? How much do you spend on things that are absolutely essential? And as your income increases, your expenses would naturally increase as well. But the thing is, where are they increasing? Are you increasing your investments? How do you behave compared to the rest of your colleagues, for instance? And once you get that sort of understanding, and depending on what you actually want and why you're doing it, then you'd get I think it would get you closer to your goals, whether it's financial freedom, whether it's to build a house, for example, as an Emirati. Would you rather buy a house or whatever it is?
So do you think that having a tracker is essential when it comes to, like, let's just say if someone has obviously the daily expenses and they have their goals and all of that, but they also have debt to manage? Does that factor in when you're creating this?
I mean, absolutely, because eventually that debt portion, that debt servicing portion that you have to pay up in addition to your expenses will be coming out of your income. So if you're not keeping track of exactly what's the percentage of debt and what's the percentage of your daily and monthly expenses that are coming out of your income, then you might be a bit lost, and you find yourself at the end of the year, after your salary, after your bonus, after factoring everything in, you'd find yourself perhaps in the same exactly where you started at the beginning of the year. So, and of course, one thing one might cover another, because if you're buying a house, then that's a different story, because that debt servicing that you're doing is essentially providing you with house equity that's increasing year over year, and that's perfectly fine. However, with some others, for example, who accumulate debt just to spend it on things that are zero income generating, then that's another story, and that's where you have to just keep a track on where your money is going.
What advice would you give to people who they're aware of their behaviors? Let's just say they have impulsivity when it comes to spending and shopping, as an example, or like, they like to travel beyond their means or whatever it may be. What advice can you give them to take more control over their behaviors and their finances?
I mean, I think this is something that I wouldn't say you're born with, but usually you're raised up with, because as you grow older, as you start taking more responsibilities, as you go into your first job, as you rent your first apartment, these things start happening to you. Like I said, with the psychology of money book, that money management factor will happen to you whether you like it or not. So the only person that can fix it is you, and all the tools are at your disposal. Whether you're going to use other applications, whether you're going to use an Excel sheet, whether you use whatever you want to do, but eventually it falls under your hands, and you need to set a goal of where you want to get. And by goal, I don't mean saying something like, I want to have $10 million by the age of 40, for example. Yeah, you can do that, of course, but just being realistic, and because no one knows what's going to happen in 10, 20 years. But for example, you can tell yourself, by the end of the year, I want to have saved up 30% of my annual income. I want to have invested 25% of my income, whatever it is. And if you don't work towards that goal, as life increases and as you grow older and as your expenses increase, you're going to find yourself in an endless loop where it becomes even harder and harder to get rid of. So step one would be to start getting a decent view over where everything is flowing, what's flowing in, what's flowing out, and what are you doing to gain that financial freedom.
A lot of people tend to avoid financial things. Like, they don't want to see things clearly. They kind of like live in the moment, I guess. They just want to go about things and have things, fall wherever they may. What advice would you give to those people to have more organization when it comes to their finances?
At the end of the day, you're responsible for your own actions. And any decision that you take now will come back and haunt you a bit later. Anything that you do will come back. See, everything that you're doing, all the savings that you're saving now, all the gratification that you're postponing, essentially, is something that's supposed to give you something, that's supposed to provide you with that financial freedom at some point later on. Whereas if you tell yourself, no, I want to enjoy my money now. I want to get that 600,000 dirham car. I want to go on that business class trip that's going to cost me 50, 60K. That's money that you took from your future to spend now. Whereas any money that you're postponing, not spending now, and putting it in an investment fund for your future, that's something that you're using later on.
I really liked what you said about the money that you're using now essentially is money you're borrowing from your future to spend now. I think that's a really interesting way of looking at things and could be a good sense check when you're looking at, do I need to spend this right now or not, right?
Yeah, but most people don't think of it like that. And that's the way I think is the most important way to look at it. Because you always see these Instagram videos. What would you tell to your 20-year-old self? What do you tell to your 15-year-old self? What would you have done differently? And this is exactly it. You're in that moment. So the thing is, what are you doing now to get a better future and a more financially free future later on? And that's what most people, I'm afraid, don't think of.
How would you say your behaviors have changed around this space? Have you noticed a shift, or were you always kind of like risk averse and very much focused on future goals?
No, I wasn't always risk averse actually. I think when I was 23 years old, I bought a car that was 9 months my salary. Yeah, and then only when I sold it and realized how much money I've lost in such a short period of time is when I started realizing, oh my God, that's a lot of money that I should have invested. But at the end of the day, it's all a learning curve. So you make some mistakes and you move on. But what we're trying to do, what myself and others have always encouraged, is that you need to start where others have ended up, not repeat the same mistakes. Some people will have to go through the same mistakes. Of course, that's nature of life at the end of the day. But the ideal thing would be for you to just pick up and learn from others' mistake, which is easier said than done, obviously.
When it comes to debt, let's just say, we're looking and we're getting excited about, getting leverage debt here, investing here and doing all this stuff and getting a house and all that. At what point is that too much?
I mean, when it gets to a point where you cannot service it on your own and you need to accumulate additional debt to close out the previous debt.
Since we're on the topic of paying off debt, so, we often hear the term debt restructuring. Can you walk us through what that means?
Debt restructuring is when you get to a point. See, it can be something positive or negative. With in certain occasions, for example, once debt gets out of your hand, let's say you've lost your income, for instance, or you lost your job and you have no way of servicing that debt, then the restructuring allows you, for example, to get smaller payments over longer periods of time, where the bank would charge you more interest, fine. But at the end of the day, you're given basically that option to pay it off over a longer period of time because you cannot pay it now. On the other hand, if, for example, you've taken out a home loan on a high interest rate, but rates have dropped, but your rate is fixed, you can always go to another bank and refinance that loan on a lower interest rate. So that allows you to lower your debt servicing amount essentially, and you can get some additional benefit as a result.
So should people opt in for fixed or variable interest rates when they're applying for loans?
I mean, that's it's a complicated question that needs quite a deep dive. So if you're going for a home loan, for instance, if the rates, I would say, below 4% or 3%, it's always to go for fixed, but no bank in the UAE is going to allow you fixed debt for duration of the debt. Most banks, what they would offer is a fixed rate for like a 3 to 5 year period. Some of them would go as far as 6 or 7, but that's quite rare. Most would give you 4 to 5 years. After that, you will have to just move to the variable portion. Mm-hmm. If you're going for a car loan, it depends on the rates of each. For example, with a car loan, usually for Emirates NBD, for example, and I'm not saying this because I'm an employee of the bank, but the rate is the best I've found in the market. I have 2 cars, both of them are financed with the Emirates NBD because of the rate, and none of them are employee rates as well. But again, it always depends on how much rate you're getting. So you need to actually sit down with a calculator and work this out.
What are some questions that people should be keeping in mind or ask when looking to apply for a loan?
So in one of my former roles when I was in another bank before joining Emirates NBD, I asked a customer care professional like what happens during the signing process. So one of the things he said to me, which was quite shocking, which was that most people don't ask any questions when it comes to the loan. They just say, where can I sign? They ask 2 questions. Where do I sign? And when am I going to receive the loan in my account? That's it. So I think that's one of the things that people should take care of in all sense with almost everything in life, because in this day and age, you should always read very carefully whatever document you're signing, whether you're entering an agreement with a bank or with a law firm or with their agency, whatever it is. Not all contracts will be fair. I mean, it's up to you as a consumer to understand what's fair to you and what isn't. Um, so I think one of the things that people should do that perhaps I don't see many of them doing is that you need to really get a good look just to see what are the risks here for you. One story I've heard multiple times was that people wanting to pay the loan off early, but then coming to be surprised that there's a 1% fee, saying, why am I paying off a fee? I just want to get rid of the loan. I'm paying the bank their money early. So that is why it's always important for the consumer to read carefully what's in front of them and understand what they're signing.
So looking at the process of applying for a loan, what are questions that people should be asking?
When it comes to that, I think you should ask whatever comes to your mind, all the important things. What happens if I pay it off early? How much interest am I paying? Is there any additional fees that I'm not aware of? What's your policy on, for example, on restructuring the loan? What if I wasn't able to pay it back? What if I wanted to postpone a couple of payments? How does that work? Everything essentially that you think even has a remote chance of happening. And the thing is that you should ask the bank professional everything you need, but at the end of the day, to get a clear and neutral view, I think you should always consult with others who have no benefit from you, whether you do it or not. I mean, of course, banks are usually very careful on what they sell clients, and there's a massive mis-selling penalty if it's found that the customer care professional has violated the consumer's right or whatever. That's absolutely fine, and they're great rules to have. But at the end of the day, it's in the consumer's best interest to seek out all the guidance and all the answers possible from several parties, not just the party that benefits most from you getting into that investment or loan or whatever it is. Especially for non-professional investors and and people who are not very savvy with banks and financial institutions.
What would you give as an advice for someone who's overwhelmed by their financial situation and is finding it difficult to navigate around it and is on the brink of perhaps financial instability?
One of the things that most people say is that you need to save more, But the thing is, in our current day and age, ever increasing expenses, that becomes a bit difficult. Not all people have the option to save. Some of them have a lot of responsibilities, so it becomes so difficult. So the best way to counter that, and it's obviously much easier said than done, is to increase your income. Just need to find a way to increase that sort of income any way you can. And to be honest, with the power of social media, with the power of the tools that we have available, whether it's on YouTube, whether it's whatever it is, there are so many things you can learn and so many things you can do to increase your income. So many of them take time. Obviously, nothing is easy, and you need to be very lucky for something to come easy in your way. However, I think that's the thing that people should focus on most, even more than savings, in my opinion. For those in a dire situation where they're indebted and they're heavily into their expenses and not finding a way out. So that's the only way out, in my opinion.
Yes, to find different revenue streams, as you mentioned.
Different revenue streams, even if they start slow, whatever they may be. I mean, especially on social media, the way I'm seeing is, for example, on Twitter, on X platform, you get payouts that are, even though tiny, they do eventually tend to add up. And on Snapchat and on Instagram, and you can build a following, talking about anything that you feel like you're good at. You can always build your knowledge in something over YouTube. I mean, a few days ago, I read about a pianist, a child who learned completely from YouTube and now has been won a national competition or something. Just a child. So there is nothing that you cannot learn in this day and age, but as long as you allocate the proper time and resources for that.
Yeah. You know, a lot of people tend to delay savings because they have debt. And you touched on that briefly when it comes to dire situations. But overall, what are your thoughts on people who say that, why should I save when I have debt to pay?
I think the main reason you need to save is because you have debt that you need to pay off, because that debt is not going to be paid off on its own. I think one of the most bizarre points that are quite common with youth, and I personally had them as well, was that you can just enjoy life as much as you can while you're young, because you're going to make money for the rest of your life. While that would be true, but you can also set yourself back many, many years in advance by those couple of years where you think you're just having fun and you can spend as much as you want. Because all that time is taking away years. It's essentially like smoking. You see how, how there are always these studies when tell you smoking shorten each cigarette shortens your life by like a half a day or a few hours or something, and eventually those accumulate. Same thing happens with investing and overspending on things that you don't need. Everything that you're not, all funds that you're not investing in, you're spending on leisure and entertainment, eventually do take out some of your years. Now, I'm not saying don't spend anything. No, enjoy your life, enjoy your time. I mean, we all should. I think it's very important for you to wind down because you eventually remember experiences, not items that you're buying, but you should also take into consideration how much you need to save and how much you need to invest just to be able to have that, just so that you don't completely sell off your future to enjoy your time at the moment.
So, if you were to wrap up and say 3 major tips that people can start adopting now when it comes to like navigating their expenses and trying to just be better when it comes to like debt accumulation and all of that, what would those 3 points be?
1, control your expenses. And 2, find yourself another source of revenue because nobody's coming to save you, and life will only get more expensive. It's not going to become cheaper anytime soon, in my opinion. And finally, you just need that commitment. You just need that really, really hard commitment. I mean, obviously everyone knows Mr. Beast, okay, from YouTube. So one of the most important things Mr. Beast said, I remember on the Joe Rogan episode where he appeared a couple of years back, he said, I was addicted to making it on YouTube. He's like, to me, it was an addiction. He's like, most people say you need to spend 10,000 hours on something to become an expert. He's like, I spent 50,000 hours at least before I made it, just studying YouTube videos. What would make what would make a video go viral? Once it goes viral, how long does it stay there? But what other indices? What gets people to tick? What thumbnail works? What sort of commentary works? What's the title? What's this? What's that? We used to sit 10 hours per day just analyzing YouTube videos. And the guy's a billionaire now. He's in his mid-20s. So you need to be obsessed with whatever you want to achieve. And that is, I think, the best way of getting whatever you want, whether to be financially literate, whether to be financially free. If you're not obsessed, it's going to take you much longer than it would otherwise. Commitment, find another source of revenue, and control your expenses and see what you're doing in real time rather than just spending and getting the bank to take off whatever they want from your card and that's it, living life free. That's not a way it's going to work.
Yeah, really good points. Now on to my last question that I'm asking everyone on the show is what does wealth mean to you outside of the money aspect?
Even with the money aspect, even if you take it into consideration, I think wealth is taking control of your own time. It's not having to wake up in the morning to rent your time to somebody else. I think that is the meaning of wealth. To be able to do what you want to do, to wake up in the morning feeling, I want to do this or I want to do that, and being able to do that without having to rent out your time for anyone else.
Yeah, no, honestly, it's a really good interpretation of wealth. You shared a lot of knowledge and expertise with us today. Managing debt is a complex undertaking, but I believe you were able to break it down quite effectively in today's conversation. So thank you so much for that.
Thank you for having me.
To everyone listening in, remember that your financial experience is your own unique journey. So take it one step at a time and recognize that awareness gained today is already progress. Thank you again for listening, and I'll see you next time.